Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're taking on a massive, fascinating, and honestly, kind of deeply frustrating economic puzzle. We're looking at a nation that literally has everything it needs to thrive, yet somehow finds itself completely stuck in the mud. We're talking about Brazil and a wild concept that experts call the stagnation of industrial feudalism. Okay, let's dive into this. So, why exactly is Brazil not rich? It's a super straightforward question, but the answer, well, that's incredibly complex. Seriously, if you just look at the raw facts, the unbelievable natural resources, the sheer size of their economy, this is a question we really shouldn't even need to ask. And yet, it's basically the defining mystery of the nation. How on earth does a country with such immense, jaw-dropping potential find itself trapped in this frustrating, repetitive cycle of economic stagnation? Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the massive gap between potential and reality. I mean, just look at the contrast. On paper, Brazil is a literal global powerhouse. We're talking total dominance in agriculture, an incredibly rich supply of minerals. The ingredients for massive, widespread success are all right there for the taking. But the reality? It's incredibly stark. Instead of this booming, inclusive prosperity you'd expect, the economy has spent decades trapped in stagnation. Experts literally call these periods lost decades. We're seeing systemic debt and extreme inequality totally taking root, which tragically turns what should be an absolute economic miracle into a global cautionary tale. To really solve this economic mystery, we've got to look beneath the surface. Section 1. The Legacy of Extraction, Historical Clues. Let's examine how this economic DNA actually builds across three critical steps. It all starts with Step 1, colonial extraction. Now, this wasn't just some brief period in history. It established an entire economic foundation. And that DNA led directly to Step 2, where the land basically remained unshared because of failed reforms. That historical failure, it didn't just fade away over time. Nope, it evolved right into Step 3, the modern wealth concentration that completely defines the country today. It's a direct, unbroken chain from the past right to the present. Think about the sheer mechanics of this for a second. The entire economic foundation was originally built to pull resources out of the land rather than to actually build a broad, inclusive economy for the people living there. I mean, when your system is designed from day one to extract value and just send it away, rather than circulate it and build up the local population, you are totally setting the stage for long-term structural inequality. The system isn't broken. It's functioning exactly as it was originally designed to function. But there was a moment where that trajectory could have totally changed. Section 2. The land reform failure, the turning point. So the crucial point is that the real turning point for Brazil wasn't some sudden crisis or a massive natural disaster. Actually, it was an omission. It was the complete failure to implement land reform. Because this reform failed, the land, which, remember, is the core source of wealth and opportunity, was never shared. It just stayed locked in the hands of the very few. And honestly, this single failure permanently locked in the nation's extreme inequality. It prevented millions of people from ever getting a solid foothold in the economy. And because that wealth and land were never shared, a highly restrictive economic system totally took over. Section 3, Inside Industrial Feudalism, a restrictive system. That brings us to the big concept here, industrial feudalism. This is a modern system where an incredibly small elite still controls the vast majority of the nation's wealth. I want you to really think about the weight of that term for a second, feudalism. That's a word we usually associate with, old history books. Definitely not modern global economies. Yet, right here, operating right now, in the modern era, you have a system functioning on those exact same exclusionary principles. Experts actually describe this dynamic as acting, quote, much like lords in the Middle Ages. And man, that analogy is incredibly powerful. Because even as the entire world changes around them, even as technology advances at lightning speed and global markets completely evolve, these old power structures, they remain completely intact. They've effectively kept the country's immense potential locked away behind a massive wall, completely inaccessible to the average citizen. It's literally a modern economy walking around wearing the armor of medieval wealth concentration. And this brilliantly illustrates the reality of the situation. I mean, when a staggering 95% of wealth is hoarded by a small elite, leaving this microscopic 5% sliver for the average citizen, well, you immediately understand why the wealth from massive agricultural and mineral exports just never trickles down. It doesn't trickle down because the system is perfectly designed to catch every single drop of it right at the top. So let's examine the true modern-day cost of this deeply entrenched inequality. Section 4, the cost of inequality, systemic flaws. The compounding negative effects here are just devastating. Wealth stays tightly concentrated right at the top, which traps the broader population in this relentless, punishing loop of systemic debt. And that leads directly into an endless cycle of missed opportunities. Ultimately, failing to fix these deep-rooted systemic issues has turned one of the most resource-rich nations on the entire planet into a global cautionary tale of extreme inequality. It really just proves that having all the natural wealth in the world is absolutely meaningless if your underlying economic structure is broken. Which leaves us with one incredibly vital question to ponder. Can a nation ever truly grow if its wealth is basically controlled by a tiny elite? It's a question that goes way, way beyond Brazil, directly challenging how we view economic structures all over the world. Thanks so much for joining me in this explainer. Keep questioning those structures, keep digging into the data, and I absolutely can't wait to explore our next big topic with you soon.